And it's been another 2 days, so here's another treatment of the TrueColor foliar spray to soak the cuttings. So while I'll leave this soaking, I'll show a 12-day update on the other cacti and plants that got a foliar treatment. So the biggest noticeable difference in the treatments is this specific variegated geocalcium, and you can see there's a very strong hot pink color, and the green areas are almost a black tone. It's a very dark purple, and this is the most noticeable difference with after the treatment. I do have a Russian subscriber that mentioned the color of these variegateds do vary a bit with UV radiation, and I'm sure there is some influence due to that. We're in summer and it does get direct sunlight. However, over the years I have already kept this in full sun, and the change isn't as strong as this difference. But do keep in mind, this is, again, we're in summer and this does get full sun. But with the other ones, I usually have a purple tone during the hot sun like this. The tone does usually change to a very dark purple. But with the treatment on this one, it didn't cause that effect. It actually turned to a lime green, and the others are a bit darker, but it's not the normal purple tone that usually occurs with the summer UV radiation and heat. This one also picked up the similar trait, where rather than turning all purple dark, there's the green tone that was before. It lightened a bit, and the colors in person, on camera it doesn't pick up great, but in person they all tend to pop out a little bit. One thing that, I don't know if it's a pro or con, but the colors are a little bit flat. I think that's the correct term. There isn't a sheen to it or like a gloss effect. The colors are fairly flat. This one you can see the nice details on the difference of colors, and these have not changed their position or lighting situation, but mainly with this one the effect is very strong with a difference after the treatment. It's been around 12 days now, and within 14 days usually the organic acids that are applied have been completely consumed by the plant. And while it does mean that the plant returned to baseline, the effects do last for a few months, and you do not need to reapply this for quite some time. To retest this, I'll apply this again in the winter in around 6 months, and we'll see if there's still this color change. With the chariponga, they received the same treatment. With green foliage leaves, I do recommend a lower dosage or a higher dilution at 4 liters per milliliter of the solution rather than 1:1. But in any case, the green, you can see it's a lighter green, and with the shaded portions, rather than getting a different color, you can see the shaded portions are much darker. There is some tip burn, which I mentioned is common since it does increase the nutrient uptake. Here is the kratom. On the outside of the leaves, there's some signs of leaf burn as well. And overall, it's doing fine. With the astrophytum, again, like I mentioned, the color gets a bit flat, and with most of them, the green tone is almost uniform. But with this one, you can still see there's some slight different shadings. The very new growth near the center and the apex of the ribs is a darker green tone. It hasn't affected flowering, but I have mentioned before it may affect the development of fruits, so just be aware of that. Particularly, I tested this with tomatoes, and the plant simply does not ripen. So in any case, you shouldn't apply this to any fruit crops, but that was in the observation of mine. You can see a very dark green tone, and they're doing quite well. With certain traits, it's harder to show or notice on camera, but I think you can make out there's a darker green tone in the older leaves, and the green shade on the new leaves are very unlike what they normally are. And like I mentioned, you should use a higher dilution. There is some neurosis on some of the leaves, but it is localized and minimal, and the new leaves do show a minimal amount of leaf burn as well from increased nutrient uptake. And these are very heavy feeders to start with, but you can kind of make out a red outline, and in my experience it's not from UV radiation but actual signs of leaf burn. There is very likely an increase in alkaloid production as well, just as I've shown with Trichocereus. And I did fertilize recently all of my plants, but the effects do not usually appear so quickly. So this is the effect from the TrueColor application. With the Psychotria, there was a very pale lime green color to the leaves. They still remain fairly light green, but if you can notice near the veins and the stems on the leaves, there's a very dark green color, and some of them have darkened as well a bit more. And from my personal experience, again, you may observe something differently, but the color doesn't usually change so quickly, and when they do, it's usually a very dark green tone you get. And there's a lot of new growth. With very hot summer temperatures, I usually get slower growth, and the main growth is near fall with the cooler temperatures. But again, everyone has different conditions, so maybe you observe something differently. With this specific Psychotria, it's doing the best with the treatment. The leaves are much darker green, the new leaves, and overall the difference aren't extremely noticeable, but there is a difference. Here you can see a dark green, and with some Trichocereus, like this Bergesi, the already slightly blue tone took an almost silver to silver white color. I haven't noticed this much of a difference before for the Trichocereus, but you can see it doesn't rub off too quickly. and it is quite noticeable in person. On camera it doesn't always get the correct tone. With this one it's also it's a bit stronger as well. And yeah, with some foliar on the green leaves, particularly with the higher concentration, you get some very dark green leaves without fertilizing. You can see there is some, it kind of looks like nutrient burn, but if you look closer the structure is a bit different. It kind of looks like it's dehydrated, with the stem of the leaves being very vein-like, where it's not usually so prevalent with other leaves. And like I mentioned before, this is not a necessary product. It has 0 NPK value, and it's a complex or a mixture of different organic acids that are present in nearly all plants. This shouldn't be applied in excess, and it shouldn't be applied to fruit crops and mainly ornamental plants. So with some green leaf plants, like I mentioned, there are some negative effects from the higher concentration rate that I used. I do recommend a lower concentration rate, but it doesn't affect all the plants. With this fern here, the leaves, you can see that it didn't get the very dark green tone, but actually a lighter shade of green. Based on a few different research papers that I used when formulating this, it tends to choose the shades that are optimal for the photosynthesis of the plant. And again, it's hard to pick up on camera, but these are a very light green tone rather than a very dark that there was before. And even some sensitive plants have had 0 negative effects that I can notice so far. On this seersucker, I don't see any negative effects yet, and it's doing quite well after the treatment. Nothing particularly special, but there's no strong burning effect or anything. And with the kratom, some show less negative effects. The green is a different green than normally occurs without any treatment. And yeah, some plants get a very, very dark green, while others seem to be fairly normal or unchanged from the treatment. And it hasn't affected the flowering. There's still 2 mammillarias that are close to flowering. And overall, that's it. With this specific Trichocereus here, the blue tone right under the areoles, I'm not sure if you can pick it up on the camera, but this is the first time I'm actually seeing a blue tone. I usually get like bluish white, but here there are noticeable blue tones actually right above the areoles, not underneath. It kind of looks like the weeping black rot without the actual black rot. How it gets under the skin, it gets a darker blemish, and then it like bleeds out like this, and it remains like this. It looks like it's like on the edge of weeping black rot, but it doesn't bleed out, and the blue tone is much stronger with this Pachanoi. And The rest are, like I mentioned, there's a flat tone to it. It's not glossy or anything, and it's kind of hard. Again, it's something you need to observe physically, but the tone on all of them are all darker, which you may associate with the high UV radiation. But I have applied this in other seasons, and the effect still stands in those less intense sun conditions. And again, this is a 12-day update after the application of 1 milliliter foliar to 1 liter water, and the effects are, at least to me, noticeable. There's again a darker green tone, and the other benefits, which I am not claiming myself, but the research papers that I've read when formulating this, it shows an increase in various properties. And when I tested this to test the original proposal of increasing secondary alkaloids in Trichocereus, the cell size and some other compositions of the plant are different with the treatment. So with the TrueColor foliar spray that I'm trying to sell, I'm not going to try to upsell you or give you false promises. I did a single attempt with the foliar application with the ethylene as the other experiment, and it showed an increase. I'm repeating it, and this time I'm doing multiple applications on experiment number 2. And if you have any doubts or questions about this, as long as it doesn't include what are the exact organic acids or their amounts, I'm not going to share that, since that'll obviously just devalue my product. But I will answer and even do different experiments with this foliar spray. I have zero problems with doubts or questioning any of my results, or even like the color comparisons that I mentioned before. Every doubt and opinion you have is completely valid, and if you propose a specific test or a way to prove or disprove the functions, I'm more than happy to set up an experiment to show that it's effective and it does what I propose it says. As for the increase in yields, you'll just have to take my word for it. I personally don't have an issue with having to lie about my results, but I know there have been some unscrupulous characters in the past doing influencing and messing with the yields and different things just to upsell a cutting, a clone, or what have you. The results that I get are entirely true, but I guess someone will have to test it for themselves sooner or later just to verify my results, since obviously I am the seller and I will profit from saying that it increases, say, 100% yield, which I did mention in the beginning, but after more research, the total yield is only around 40%, and saying that it increased by 100% may have been a fallacy, since I was washing the salts. So can take my word for it or just ignore it. Again, this is not a necessary product. It's a specialty product. Use it if you'd like. This is only the alkaloid profile, and the secondary metabolites are just one factor to it. Like I mentioned, it does help with stress relief. Different factors such as excess sun, certain salt conditions, and other factors. It increases nutrient uptake. It darkens or makes certain pigments more intense to increase the photosynthesis efficacy. And it doesn't affect flowering. If anything, it may actually increase flowering, but that is not something I'm promising. I personally don't like to over fertilize my cacti, since when you over fertilize, the biomass within it gets very diluted and bloated. And in my experience over the past decade growing plants, is over fertilizing, particularly with nitrogen, it causes an increased risk of rot, since the bloated growth tends to cause some increases in bacterial infection. And the more compact and slower growth, I have rarely had that issue. I do get rot once in a while from the root, and I did share the experiment in the past where I didn't trim some roots and I trimmed the rest. Trimming your roots is the way to go. I had essentially 0 losses from the trimmed roots, and I think it was 8 or 16% loss with untrimmed roots. The amount of growth can vary, and that may or may not be directly correlated with the trimming. But as for actual losses, in my small experiment, trimming your roots is the way to go 100%. And I have applied this to my entire collection. I wouldn't be selling a product that would damage your, even if not necessarily monetary value, but personal value and your time investment. I wouldn't sell a product that would affect your collection. It may behave differently if you already excessively fertilize your plants, so just be aware of that. You would want to reduce your fertilizing just a little bit until you see the effects. With cacti, I see extremely limited negative effects. A few, maybe 2 or 3, did have this orange rot. I wouldn't necessarily associate it with the TrueColor, but it is a possibility, so just be aware of that. Higher concentrations and excessive applications will burn your plants, since there will be a buildup. You want to wait a minimum of 2 weeks before reapplying if you don't have your desired results, since 2 weeks is the time it takes for your plants to consume and use all of the organic acids that are in the TrueColor foliar spray. And yeah, if you have any questions or doubts, feel free to share. If you just think this is snake oil, that's fine, you can comment that too. I have 0 issues with doubts and criticism, and am as transparent as I can be with my experiments, my results, and my cultivation. Just one more note, like I mentioned, this is not a soil soaker. You don't want to like soak your soil so that it saturates your solution with the solution. This is a foliar spray. Just to run down is fine. My substrate is 100% Brita or gravel in the States. It's 100% gravel. There's 0 organic material here in most of my collection. So that's just one more note, just so everyone's aware. I do have it organic material topsoil in my Trico series, and these foliar, I think that's how you pronounce it. But a majority of my collection is 100% organic or 100% inorganic substrate. So if you have any questions, doubts, criticisms, please share. I'm not trying to upsell this. I'm being as transparent as I can be. It's the ingredients are organic acids. You can Google it. You'll get a list of maybe 20 or so organic acids. Some of them are very common, others are less common. I chose the ones that I used in my product specifically with the intent of increasing biosynthesis of secondary alkaloids and secondary metabolites. The color effect was a side result that I had while experimenting with the dilutions, and I wanted to see any negative effects that it may have caused, like burning. I did apply this at full concentration on cacti, and I do get minimal effects, but with green foliage, if you apply a high concentration, you will burn your plants. So use the suggested dilution rates that I have on the package. If you're interested in buying and testing this for yourself, unfortunately for the States and anywhere other than Brazil, the shipping cost does have a minimal cost of $30 regardless of the amount. But if you are interested, get in contact with me either through my email address, Instagram, a comment, or you can purchase directly on my Ko-Fi page. I have a link to the product. It comes, I'll include some bonuses, so it'll come around close to around maybe $6, $7 each with shipping. You can easily resell this. There is no expiration date, and in theory they should last indefinitely, but maybe in the future I'll add maybe a 2 or 3 year expiration date. But again, there's zero organic material in here, zero NPK value. It's simply organic acids, and this is not an organic product. It could be in the future, but this is I would say chemically derived, but it's not even that. It's just not organically made. It could be derived from organic material, but I'm not going to claim something I don't know exactly. So